Hey everybody, Steve Bogran here from Pro Physique. Today I'm talking about how aggressive is too aggressive.
My name is Steven, and this is our video about health and fitness things. And I work for Pro Physique, and I am just a guy with a fitness thing for you.
Well, I hope you're all having a great day. Did you enjoy my angry face? You look like you gotta poop. Well, a really good question today, and I think this matters to so many of us because we get into this idea of dieting, we get into this place, and we're like, all right, well, I'm gonna get at it. I'm gonna go hard, I'm gonna make sure that I'm being really aggressive and get everything done. But there are some questions here in terms of how aggressive we want to go and how aggressive might in fact be too aggressive. And so I think there's definitely some thought process here that we need to keep in consideration for where we even start. If you're currently at 1,200 calories a day, then we probably don't want to start our diet from that starting point. We most likely want to look at getting calories up, increasing those for a bit, really allowing our body to maintain, adapt, and then going from there. And so the first thing that we want to talk about when we're talking about the aggressiveness of a diet is really probably our starting place. Making sure that we're not going maybe a little bit too hard too quick. And generally speaking, where do I like to see calories? Well, this is always going to be something that is individually dependent, but I can give you a couple of rules of thumb. Bing! I don't even know if I have a editing tool for that, but if I do, I'll do it. So anyways, a general rule of thumb for where we want to be at to start a dieting phase that I like to use is roughly 15 times your body weight in calorie intake. If you're a competitor and you know what your lean body mass is or your projected stage weight, that can also be used, because if we are significantly over our maybe lean body mass or stage weight and we're maybe not 15 times that higher body weight in calorie intake, we still could be in a good spot to be dieting. And so we do want to keep that in mind, that things are all relative, right? So 15 times my stage weight as a 100-pound competitor is going to be different than 15 times my stage weight as a 200-pound competitor for calorie intake. And so just generally speaking, I like this as a starting point of saying the sun is shining, we're in a good spot, the vibes are good, the music is solid, we're in a good place to look at dieting. And then along with that, I also do like to keep an eye on structured cardio and maybe step count. And so if we're talking about structured cardio, where I like us to be at is maybe 1 to 2 hours a week of structured cardiovascular activity and still maintaining weight. Now, the caveat for this starting place is that we are maintaining weight at these calories and at this cardio. That ensures that we should hopefully be seeing a response when we make a decrease to calories or increase to cardio going from this position. And so making sure that we're in a good starting place is always our number one of how aggressive is too aggressive, because it allows us a lot more room to work with. When we start at a lower point in food or a higher point in cardio, what we can oftentimes see is we end up being pretty aggressive pretty darn quick. What we do is we might have some room to diet, but it will be more short-lived. Remember, at a certain point we adapt to what we do, and we can try and play with some things to try and get some more room out of the diet, get some more weight loss out. However, at a certain point, our body tells us when we're done. We're like, hey, that's it. Now, there is one caveat to that calorie thing. Because a lot of the time what I see from maybe other competitors or individuals coming to me to diet is that their protein is way high. And so I don't normally look at protein as a macronutrient to cut for fat loss. We can, and if you're extremely high on protein, we absolutely could cut some of that out. And we may even see benefits from it. However, generally speaking, where I like to be at is, again, 1 gram per pound of estimated stage weight or lean body mass is kind of a low end. Maybe a little bit higher if we need that extra protein to stay full and happy and adherent to the diet. But I don't want to necessarily just have protein being exorbitantly high for no reason. It doesn't add us any added benefit. And I would argue that especially when it comes to a calorie deficit and loss, cutting things that are going to be more energy yielding, like carbohydrates or fats, are probably more bang for the buck. So if your calories are high, but our protein is maybe double what it needs to be, it might not be exactly the same in terms of if we were to have the same calorie, but have higher carbohydrates or higher fats as part of that. So we do want to look at your macronutrient split as well. And that same protein thing, boom, is also going to be one of my really big questions here in terms of how aggressive is too aggressive. Because even though our calories might be higher, and say at 1200, relatively speaking, or whatever it might be, if our protein is the vast majority of those and our carbohydrates are significantly low or our fats are significantly low, we may be being a little bit too aggressive. Stephen, what does that mean? Okay, well, beyond the fact that we should be looking at what is a relative calorie intake that's probably okay. When we're talking about an aggressive diet, we're probably talking about 10 times your body weight in calorie intake. That was what I would be considering a pretty darn aggressive diet. However, I also like to look at carbs and fats as being really big parts of what is too much. I've said this before, I'll say it again, I don't go below 35 grams of fats. And in fact, for most people, I try to keep them at 40 to 45 as a bottom end. What that means for a lot of my clients is that we're probably not getting too much into cutting a ton of fats, depending on where their fats stay. And the reason why is because for most of us, we really need those fats for hormones. And of course, for all of us, we need those fats for fat-soluble vitamins. So how aggressive is too aggressive in terms of, regardless of calories for fats? I would say 35 being a bottom end. If you're any more aggressive than that, I would say that's probably too aggressive. What about for carbs? Well, again, this is going to be something that matters based on the individual. What we can do for somebody who is 100 pounds is different than probably what we can do for somebody who is 200 pounds. And so we want to look at carbohydrates as saying, all right, what is relatively going to be reasonable? For most people, 100 grams of carbs is where I start being like, ooh, right? That's where I start being, this is going to be tough. And you can look at that as, we'll say, 1 gram of carb for each pound of body weight. Same thing. Probably going to be really aggressive as we start getting to a carb per pound. Now, can we go a little bit more aggressive than that depending on the individual? I'm sure we can. And most people will deal with that well for a short amount of time. The hard part is that without carbohydrates in our diet, what we see is everything else falter a lot of the time. And so when we say how aggressive is too aggressive for carbohydrates, I like to look less at the hard number and more at what is the person doing? How are they feeling? What is our fatigue index at? Are we able to train the same? Are we losing performance and strength, right? Have we lost so much energy and then our fatigue is so high that we're not getting the same kind of step count, that we're not moving around as much? Oftentimes we like to set these kind of parameters and boundary lines of this is okay, this is not okay. And I do think that having those as kind of guidelines, and definitely for some of them hard lines, is super beneficial, and yes, we should. However, carbohydrates isn't maybe the same in that aspect as to where we probably want to really look at how the individual is responding. Are they still losing fat? Are we really feeling all those effects of the low carbohydrate diet, the fatigue, the brain fog, the low libido, all that other kind of stuff as well? And so if we pass a point to where we're kind of like trying to stay head above water, and we're trying not to drown with it, well, we might have gone a little bit too hard on the carbs. And what I oftentimes find is that when we pass that point, it does more detriment than it does to help. Because everything else loses calorie expenditure, we end up burning so much less that calorie cut wasn't worth it. So for me, for most of my females, 100 grams of carbs is where I try to stay at or above if at all possible. Very rarely I will go below that for a contest prep when we're really pushing. And then, of course, for males, that number is going to be a bit higher, but I try to keep the guys, if not at 200 carbs, above 200 carbs, if at all possible. Again, contest prep, a little bit different of a monster. The last thing I want to talk about, and is it too aggressive, is how long we stay at those aggressive numbers. Woo! This is the hard part because it's going to be different for everybody, and we want to plan ahead and be smart. However, if we can lose a pound a week, that's going to create a great place for us to be having long, sustainable fat loss and keep as much muscle as possible. What happens is when we do these aggressive diets for too long, we not only have some really serious adaptations in terms of metabolic rate, hormones, energy levels, those kind of things. And so we do want to keep an eye on how long we're dieting, but we can also lose some of our lean tissue with that as well. So we do want to make sure that as we start seeing things slowing down and we're in those aggressive numbers, we're not getting responses, diet breaks, refeeds, all those things aren't helping anymore. We say, okay, cool, we had a successful fat loss phase, hopefully. Now, time to maintain and reverse. So I hope this helps with some of you guys in terms of your aggressive diets. Remember, not too long, and maybe some generalized ideas about how we manage what numbers are too aggressive.